Hey everyone, tonight we're leaving the familiar villages of medieval Europe behind and traveling much farther into the past to the sun-drenched hills of ancient Greece. Imagine a world where marble temples are still new, philosophers stroll through busy marketplaces, and merchant ships cross the sparkling blue waters of the Aegean Sea carrying olive oil, wine, and beautifully painted pottery to distant lands. While history often remembers great thinkers like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, or famous warriors marching into legendary battles, very few people stop to wonder about the ordinary craftsmen whose quiet labor filled every Greek home. Tonight, we're becoming one of those forgotten people, not a soldier seeking glory or a politician giving speeches in Athens, but a humble potter whose hands shape the clay vessels that every family depends upon each day. By the end of our journey, you may discover that behind every beautiful Greek vase displayed in modern museums stood countless hours of exhausting work, endless patience, and a lifetime spent covered in dust, smoke, and clay. Long before the first rays of sunlight reach the white stone buildings of your city, your day quietly begins. The air is still pleasantly cool, carrying the gentle scent of wild thyme growing among nearby hills, while only a few distant dogs bark somewhere beyond the sleeping streets, inside your small workshop yesterdays. Unfinished pottery waits exactly where you left it. Rows of bowls, jars, pitchers, oil lamps, and enormous storage vessels stand silently upon rough wooden shelves, each one slowly drying before its turn inside the kiln. In the dim light of a small oil lamp, their shadows stretch across the earthen floor like silent companions patiently awaiting another day's work. Before anyone else in the neighborhood begins preparing breakfast, you have already stepped into your workshop, knowing that every hour lost now will become impossible to recover before sunset. Unlike a farmer who plants seeds only once each season, or a fisherman who follows the tides of the sea, a potter's work never truly pauses. Every stage depends upon the one before it. Fresh clay must be collected, cleaned, kneaded, shaped, dried, decorated, fired, cooled, inspected, and finally carried carefully to the marketplace without breaking. A single careless mistake at any point can destroy several days of patient labor in an instant. A tiny stone hidden inside the clay may crack an expensive vase during firing. A sudden rainstorm can ruin pottery left outside to dry. A kiln burning slightly too hot may turn beautiful painted decorations into blackened disappointment. Every successful vessel you create represents dozens of quiet decisions made correctly from beginning to end. Your first task each morning is checking the clay prepared the previous afternoon. Stored beneath damp linen cloths inside large wooden tubs, it has rested overnight until becoming smooth and workable. You kneel beside the tub and press both hands deeply into the cool earth. The sensation is strangely calming. The clay feels soft, heavy, and slightly damp, yielding beneath your fingers with gentle resistance. Before it can become anything beautiful, however, it must first become perfectly uniform. You begin kneading the enormous mass with slow, steady movements, folding it over itself again and again to force hidden air bubbles toward the surface. The work quickly becomes exhausting. Clay weighs far more than most people imagine, and after only a short while your shoulders begin aching while your wrists quietly protest against the endless pressure. Yet this invisible effort determines whether today's pottery survives the fire waiting later inside the kiln. As dawn slowly brightens the eastern sky, sunlight slips gently through the open doorway of your workshop, revealing tiny particles of clay dust floating peacefully through the warm morning air. Outside, merchants begin opening wooden shutters across the marketplace. Shepherds lead sleepy goats toward nearby hillsides, and fishermen pull small boats onto quiet beaches after returning from the night's catch. The city is spinning wheel will begin turning beneath your practiced hands, and simple lumps of earth will slowly rise into elegant vessels destined to carry wine, olive oil, grain, water, and perhaps even survive thousands of years, long enough for people in a distant future to wonder who first shaped them. By the time the sun finally rises above the distant hills, golden light slowly begins spilling across the rooftops of your small Greek town. The whitewashed walls of nearby houses glow softly beneath the morning sun, while olive trees cast long shadows across narrow stone streets, still damp from the cool night air. Somewhere beyond the marketplace, the first merchants are already arranging baskets of figs, grapes, onions, and fresh herbs upon simple wooden stalls. Fishermen return from the sea carrying woven nets heavy with silver fish, and the gentle voices of neighbors greeting one another gradually replace the peaceful silence that covered the town only an hour before. For most people, the day is just beginning. For you, however, several exhausting hours of work have already passed, and your hands are now coated in a thin layer of reddish clay that seems impossible to remove completely. The workshop itself slowly comes alive as sunlight pours through the wide entrance. Every corner tells the story of years spent practicing the same ancient craft. Long wooden shelves stretch from floor to ceiling, supporting hundreds of unfinished vessels resting patiently while they dry. Some are no larger than a person's hand-tiny oil lamps, carefully shaped to illuminate homes after sunset. Others are enormous storage jars, nearly as tall as your shoulder. Built to protect valuable olive oil, wine, wheat, or dried fruit from moisture and insects. Every available space seems occupied by clay, bowls, cups, pitchers, plates, mixing vessels, perfume bottles, ceremonial jars, and elegant amphorae stand quietly together like an army patiently awaiting inspection. Looking across the workshop, one could almost believe that time itself had stopped, freezing hundreds of moments of careful craftsmanship beneath the warm Mediterranean sunlight. Against one wall rests the most important tool you own, not a hammer, not a chisel, and certainly not an expensive bronze blade. Instead, it is a simple potter's wheel. At first glance, it appears surprisingly ordinary. A heavy circular stone rests upon a sturdy wooden frame, worn smooth after countless years of constant use. Yet this humble machine has quietly transformed ordinary earth into objects that travel across seas, survive generations, and sometimes even outlive the cities that first created them. Before beginning another day's work, you gently place your hand upon its surface, almost like greeting an old friend that has faithfully shared every success and failure throughout your career. Beside the wheel sits another mound of carefully prepared clay, waiting patiently beneath damp cloths. Although it appears soft and effortless now, preparing this clay required remarkable patience long before sunrise. Raw earth collected from riverbanks rarely arrives ready for pottery. It must first be cleaned thoroughly, removing tiny stones, roots, shells, and countless other hidden impurities that could shatter an entire vessel during firing. Sometimes the clay is soaked in large pits filled with water, allowing heavier stones to sink while finer particles remain suspended above at other times. It must be strained repeatedly through woven baskets before finally reaching the smooth consistency demanded by experienced craftsmen. Days may pass before a single handful becomes suitable for shaping. Every beautiful Greek vase displayed inside a modern museum began its life as nothing more glamorous than muddy earth carefully purified through patient labor. You lift another heavy lump of clay onto the center of the wheel. The weight surprises even you despite performing the same movement thousands of times before. Clay possesses an unusual heaviness that quietly challenges every muscle without appearing particularly impressive. Carefully pressing it against the spinning stone, you begin turning the wheel with steady movements of your foot beneath the table. Slowly at first, then faster, the great disc begins rotating smoothly. There is something strangely hypnotic about its rhythm. The workshop falls into a peaceful silence, interrupted only by the soft hum of the turning wheel and the gentle sound of wet hands gliding across spinning clay. At this stage, nothing depends upon strength alone. Patience becomes far more valuable than force. Your thumbs press carefully into the center of the spinning mound, while both palms guide its outer walls upward little by little. Every movement must remain perfectly balanced. Push too hard on one side, and the entire vessel leans awkwardly before collapsing. Allow your hands to become too dry, and friction tears the soft surface into rough ridges impossible to repair. Press too quickly while distracted for only a single heartbeat, and hours of careful preparation instantly sink into a shapeless lump of ruined clay. Many young apprentices spend months simply learning how to keep a vessel standing upright before attempting anything beautiful. Ancient Greek pottery demanded extraordinary precision hidden beneath movements that appeared almost effortless. Slowly, almost magically, the lump begins changing before your eyes. First, it becomes a simple cylinder. Then the walls grow taller and thinner as your fingertips gently guide the spinning clay upward. A graceful neck begins appearing above the wider body, followed by a carefully shaped rim where someone, perhaps many months from now, will one day pour wine into a cup during an evening meal. There is no sudden moment when the transformation occurs. Instead, it happens gradually, so quietly that even you occasionally pause to admire how something so ordinary has become. Unexpectedly elegant beneath your own hands. Outside, life continues unfolding beyond the workshop walls. The marketplace grows steadily louder as more traders arrive from surrounding villages. Donkeys carrying baskets of olives clip steadily across uneven stone roads, while children chase one another between stalls before being called back by laughing mothers. Somewhere nearby, the rhythmic tapping of a bronze smith echoes through the morning air. Farther away, temple bells announce another ordinary day beneath the watchful gaze of the gods. Yet, inside the workshop, the spinning wheel creates its own peaceful world entirely separate from the growing noise outside. As the first vessel reaches its final shape, you carefully stretch a thin cord beneath its base, separating it gently from the spinning wheel before placing it upon a nearby wooden board. The clay remains astonishingly fragile. At this stage, even the slightest careless touch could leave fingerprints permanently impressed into its soft surface. You move slowly, almost holding your breath, before setting it carefully beside dozens of other unfinished pieces resting in neat rows across the workshop. Looking around, it becomes obvious that a potter never creates only one vessel at a time. Every stage overlaps with another. Yesterday's bowls continue drying while today's jars are still being shaped and pieces made several days. Earlier now wait patiently beside the kiln for firing. The workshop resembles a living timeline where every shelf represents another chapter in the long journey from simple earth to finished pottery. But there is little time to admire your work. The morning has only just begun, and before the sun reaches its highest point above the Greek countryside, dozens more vessels must still be shaped, trimmed, smoothed, and prepared. The spinning wheel never seems to rest for long. Almost as soon as one piece leaves your hands, another heavy mound of clay takes its place at the center of the stone disc. Once again, your foot begins turning the wheel. Once again, wet clay rises slowly beneath practiced fingers. And once again, the quiet dance between human hands and ordinary earth begins. Unua dance, repeated so many thousands of times throughout ancient Greece that centuries later historians would remember the painted masterpieces, but only rarely the tired craftsmen whose aching hands first gave them life. As the morning gradually approaches its busiest hours, the sunlight pouring into your workshop grows warmer and brighter, casting long, golden rectangles across the packed earthen floor. The peaceful coolness that greeted you before dawn slowly gives way to the familiar Mediterranean warmth that will soon fill every corner of the town. Outside, the streets are now alive with activity. Merchants loudly advertise baskets overflowing with olives, figs, and pomegranates. Goat herds encourage stubborn animals toward nearby hills with gentle whistles, while fishermen finish cleaning their boats along the harbor after another successful night upon the sea. Somewhere in the distance, the rhythmic sound of bronze hammers striking metal echoes through the air as blacksmiths begin another day's work. Every profession has awakened. Every craftsman has returned to his trade. Yet inside your workshop, surrounded by clay, dust, and quietly spinning wheels, the world still feels wonderfully calm, almost untouched by the growing noise beyond your doorway. The freshly shaped vessels standing upon their wooden boards now require your complete attention. Although they appear finished to an untrained eye, an experienced potter understands they have only completed the first stage of a remarkably long journey. Fresh clay remains dangerously fragile. At this point, it is often described as being soft as cheese. Press a single finger too firmly against its side and the entire vessel may collapse without warning. Even lifting it carelessly could distort the elegant shape you spent nearly half an hour creating. Every movement therefore becomes slower, more deliberate, almost graceful. You carefully walk between the rows of drying pottery, checking each piece individually. Some require turning slightly so they dry evenly beneath the warm breeze drifting through the open doorway. Others must be moved into deeper shade before the powerful Greek sun dries them too quickly, creating tiny cracks invisible now but devastating once the kiln reaches its highest temperature. Patience becomes your greatest tool. In many ways, pottery teaches a craftsman how to wait. There is no clever shortcut capable of rushing clay through its natural process. Nature itself decides the proper pace. If the vessels dry too slowly, production falls behind and customers become impatient. If they dry too quickly beneath the hot afternoon sun, delicate cracks spread silently across their surfaces long before anyone notices. Learning this balance often requires years of careful observation. Experienced potters instinctively understand how changing winds, humidity, and temperature affect every stage of their work. They watch the weather almost as carefully as farmers studying their crops, because both know that nature rewards patience while punishing haste. Among the dozens of unfinished pieces scattered throughout the workshop, one particular vessel demands special attention. It is an amphora, one of the largest and most valuable containers produced by Greek craftsmen, standing nearly as tall as a young child. Its broad body and narrow neck have been carefully designed to transport precious olive oil, fragrant wine, or grain across long distances. Merchant ships leaving ports such as Athens, Corinth, or Rhodes often carry hundreds of amphorae stacked tightly together beneath their wooden decks. Every jar must survive rough seas, violent storms, and months of travel without breaking. A poorly made amphora could spill an entire shipment worth months of hard-earned income. Knowing this, you inspect every curve with extraordinary care, smoothing tiny imperfections using a damp leather strip before they become permanent flaws. Once the vessels have stiffened slightly, another stage begins that demands both precision and remarkable concentration. Using simple bronze knives, smooth pebbles, and carefully shaped wooden tools, you begin refining every surface. Excess clay collected around the base is trimmed away with slow, confident movements. The rims are gently rounded until they feel perfectly smooth beneath your fingertips. Handles, which were shaped separately earlier in the morning, are now attached one by one using watery clay as a natural adhesive. This task appears surprisingly simple, yet experienced craftsmen know it is one of the most dangerous moments in the entire process. Attach a handle too early and it may sag beneath its own weight. Wait too long and the drying vessel refuses to bond properly. Even a slight difference in moisture between the two pieces can create hidden weaknesses that only reveal themselves later inside the fierce heat of the kiln. Your apprentice watches every movement with complete attention. He has already spent months carrying clay, fetching water, cleaning tools, and preparing the workshop before earning permission to attach even the smallest handle himself. Today, however, you decide it is finally time for another lesson. Handing him a modest drinking cup, you demonstrate exactly how much pressure should be applied while joining the handle to the body. He imitates your movements carefully, his hands trembling ever so slightly with nervous excitement. At first, the handle slips awkwardly to one side. Without speaking harshly, you quietly remove it, smooth the damaged surface, and encourage him to try again. This time, his movements become steadier. The handle settles naturally into place, blending almost seamlessly with the cup itself. A small smile briefly crosses his face before he quickly returns to work. In ancient Greece, mastery did not come through reading books. It passed patiently from experienced hands to inexperienced ones, one quiet lesson at a time. As midday approaches, another important visitor steps into your workshop. A wealthy merchant, dressed in a finely woven linen tunic, has arrived to inspect an order placed several weeks earlier. His ship will soon depart across the Aegean Sea, carrying wine and olive oil to distant ports, and he requires dozens of newly finished amphorae before sunset. Together, you carefully examine the completed vessels lined neatly against the wall. He taps gently upon their sides, listening to the clear, ringing sound produced by properly fired clay. A dull note might suggest hidden cracks lurking within the pottery. Satisfied by their quality, he nods approvingly before discussing prices, delivery schedules, and future orders. Such conversations are polite but important. A respected merchant may become your greatest customer for many years, while disappointing him even once could quietly send business toward another workshop across town. After the merchant departs, silence briefly returns. Sunlight now floods every corner of the workshop, revealing countless tiny particles of clay dust dancing lazily through the warm air. Your hands ache from hours of shaping, trimming, lifting, and smoothing vessels, yet another demanding task still lies ahead. Decoration. Not every piece receives elaborate artwork, of course. Ordinary cooking bowls and storage. Jars are often left plain because practical use matters far more than beauty. But larger amphorae, ceremonial craters, elegant drinking cups, and expensive perfume bottles frequently become canvases for astonishing works of art. Using brushes fashioned from animal hair, you carefully prepare a special liquid clay known today as slip. Unlike ordinary paint, this smooth mixture transforms into deep black during firing through a remarkable chemical process that Greek potters perfected centuries ago. The secret is known only to experienced craftsmen, carefully guarded within workshops and passed quietly between generations. Sitting before a freshly dried vase, you steady your breathing before touching the brush gently against its pale surface. There is no room for hesitation. Every line must flow naturally, because mistakes cannot simply be erased. Slowly, elegant patterns begin emerging beneath your careful hand. Curving vines wind gracefully around the vessel's neck. Delicate lotus flowers bloom along its shoulder. Meandering geometric borders wrap around its body with astonishing precision. Finally, within the broad central panel, a simple scene begins taking shape. A pair of athletes preparing for competition. A shepherd leading sheep across rocky hills, or perhaps sailors rowing a narrow ship beneath billowing square sails. These images tell quiet stories of everyday Greek life, preserving moments so ordinary that no historian of the time would ever think to record them. Ironically, thousands of years later, these humble painted vessels will become some of the greatest storytellers of the ancient world. Long after temples crumble, kings are forgotten, and cities fall into ruin, the pottery resting quietly inside your workshop may still survive beneath layers of earth, carrying tiny painted glimpses of ordinary Greek life into a future you could never possibly imagine. Yet for you, sitting beneath the warm Mediterranean sun, with clay beneath your fingernails and tired shoulders, aching from another long morning's labor, none of that matters. Right now, there is only another unfinished vase waiting patiently upon the work table, and another long afternoon still stretching silently ahead. As the afternoon sun climbs to its highest point above the Greek countryside, the peaceful coolness that welcomed the morning has completely disappeared. The narrow streets outside shimmer beneath the bright Mediterranean light, while every white limestone wall seems to reflect the sun's warmth back into the town. Even the olive trees standing beyond the city walls appear almost motionless, their silver-green leaves barely stirred by the occasional breeze drifting inland from the sea. Most people wisely search for patches of shade during the hottest hours of the day. Merchants stretch simple linen cloths above their market stalls, shepherds rest their flocks beneath rocky hillsides, and fishermen pull their boats onto quiet beaches before returning home for a short meal. Inside your pottery workshop, however, there is almost no escape from the heat. The thick mud brick walls protect the interior from the worst of the afternoon sun, yet dozens of drying Vessels quietly absorb warmth from every direction. Clay that felt pleasantly cool only hours ago now becomes noticeably warmer beneath your fingertips. The air itself carries a mixture of damp earth, fine dust, smoke from neighboring workshops, and the faint fragrance of olive wood burning somewhere across the town. Tiny particles of clay drift lazily through the sunlight pouring across the workshop floor, making the entire room glow with a soft golden haze. It is strangely beautiful, yet every breath reminds you that another difficult stage of the day's work is about to begin. The kiln. Among every tool owned by a Greek potter, nothing commands greater respect than the enormous firing kiln standing just beyond the rear courtyard. From a distance it resembles a small rounded stone building with a narrow entrance and a thick chimney rising above its domed roof. Unlike the graceful pottery displayed throughout your workshop, the kiln possesses a rugged, almost intimidating appearance. Years of constant fire have blackened its outer walls with soot, while countless repairs using fresh clay and stone reveal the scars left by decades of relentless use. Every potter understands one simple truth. The workshop may shape beautiful vessels, but the kiln alone decides whether they survive. Before firing can begin, every piece must be inspected one final time. You slowly walk among the hundreds of vessels prepared over the past several days. Some have already dried enough to produce a faint hollow sound when gently tapped with your knuckle. Others still contain traces of moisture hidden deep inside their thick walls, and must wait another day before risking the intense heat of the kiln. Patience here is absolutely essential. Even the smallest amount of trapped water can transform into expanding steam once exposed to extreme temperatures. The result is often sudden and devastating. A perfectly shaped vase may explode without warning, sending sharp fragments crashing into neighboring pottery and destroying weeks of careful labor within a single terrifying moment. Every experienced Greek potter carries memories of such disasters. Perhaps many years ago, when you were still an apprentice, you rushed a beautiful amphora into the kiln one afternoon simply because an impatient merchant demanded quicker delivery. At first, everything seemed perfectly normal. The fire burned steadily, the kiln warmed gradually, and confidence quietly replaced anxiety. Then, somewhere deep inside the chamber, a loud crack echoed through the workshop like a clap of thunder. Moments later, another followed, then another. By the time the kiln finally cooled the next morning, nearly half the pottery inside had shattered into useless fragments. Your master said very little that day. He simply handed you a broom and allowed the broken pieces themselves to teach the lesson that words never could. Since then, you have never hurried drying pottery again. Satisfied that today's vessels are ready, you begin arranging them carefully inside the kiln. Loading the kiln resembles solving an enormous puzzle where every object must fit perfectly without touching another. Larger storage jars are positioned along the lower chamber where temperatures remain slightly steadier. Smaller bowls and drinking cups fill the spaces between them. Delicate oil lamps occupy narrow gaps that would otherwise remain empty, while elegant painted amphorae are placed where heat circulates evenly around their graceful bodies. Every inch of space matters. An efficiently loaded kiln saves precious firewood, while a careless arrangement wastes both fuel and valuable pottery. You move slowly, almost holding your breath with each vessel. Although the clay has become firm enough to handle, it remains surprisingly fragile. A slight bump against another jar could chip its rim forever. A moment of carelessness while bending beneath the kill's low entrance might scrape away hours of beautifully painted decoration. Your apprentice assists quietly beside you, carefully passing each vessel into your waiting hands. Neither of you speaks very much. Silence feels appropriate somehow, as though the pottery itself deserves complete concentration before entering the fire that will permanently determine its fate. Hours pass before the final vessel finally disappears inside. Now another demanding task begins: firewood. Unlike modern kilns, powered by electricity or gas, an ancient Greek kiln survives entirely upon carefully chosen timber. Olive wood burns slowly with steady heat. Oak provides long-lasting embers capable of maintaining high temperatures for many hours. Pine catches quickly but disappears almost as fast, making it useful only during the earliest stages of firing. Every experienced potter gradually becomes something of an expert in fire as well, understanding different woods almost as thoroughly as different types of clay. Together with your apprentice, you carry armful after armful of carefully seasoned logs toward the kiln. Each piece feels heavier beneath the afternoon heat. Sweat rolls steadily down your forehead, leaving narrow trails through the fine clay dust coating your face. Your tunic clings uncomfortably against your back, while your hands, already rough from shaping pottery all morning, now develop fresh splinters from lifting rough timber. Few people visiting the marketplace would ever imagine that creating elegant Greek pottery required so much exhausting physical labor long before a single flame even appeared. Finally, everything is ready. You kneel beside the kiln's firebox and arrange small bundles of dry twigs beneath larger pieces of wood. A simple spark, struck from flint, catches the brittle kindling almost immediately. Tiny orange flames dance quietly at first, barely larger than candles flickering beneath a temple altar. But slowly, patiently, they begin, spreading through the carefully stacked timber. Crackling echoes softly inside the stone chamber, while thin ribbons of smoke curl upward through the chimney into the brilliant blue Greek sky. This is only the beginning. Contrary to what many people imagine, a Greek kiln cannot simply be heated as quickly as possible. Doing so would almost guarantee disaster. Instead, the temperature must rise gradually over many hours, allowing every vessel inside to warm evenly. Too much heat too quickly, and expanding air trapped within the clay may split delicate walls apart. Too little heat, however, leaves the pottery weak and unfinished. Achieving the perfect balance demands extraordinary patience. Throughout the afternoon and deep into the coming night, you will feed the fire little by little, carefully watching the color of smoke escaping the chimney, listening to the changing sound of burning wood, and judging the invisible temperature entirely through experience. There are no thermometers, no clocks, no glowing instruments measuring perfect firing conditions. Only your own eyes, your own ears, and the quiet wisdom earned after countless years standing beside this ancient kiln. As the afternoon slowly begins surrendering to evening, the flames inside the firebox burn brighter with every passing hour. Warm air shimmers above the kiln, carrying sparks high into the darkening sky where they vanish like tiny golden stars. Inside the stone chamber, hidden from sight, ordinary earth is beginning one of the greatest transformations in the ancient world. Soft clay is slowly becoming stone. Night slowly settles across the ancient Greek town, But your working day is still far from over. While families gather inside their homes to share simple evening meals of fresh bread, olives, goat cheese, and watered wine, the orange glow of your kiln burns brighter than ever against the deepening darkness. From the marketplace, the cheerful conversations that filled the afternoon have gradually faded into silence. Merchants have packed away their goods beneath heavy cloth covers. Fishermen have tied their small wooden boats securely along the harbor, and shepherds have already counted every sheep before closing the gates of their stone pens. One by one, small oil lamps begin appearing behind windows throughout the town. Tiny points of golden light scattered beneath the sky, slowly filling with stars. Yet your workshop remains awake, for tonight will decide whether weeks of careful labor become beautiful pottery or nothing more than broken fragments of hardened clay. Standing beside the kiln, you feel its tremendous heat radiating through the cool evening air. Even from several steps away, waves of warmth wash across your face with surprising force. The thick stone walls glow faintly in places where countless hours of fire have heated them beyond imagination. Every few moments, another handful of dry olive wood disappears into the hungry flames, producing showers of bright orange. Sparks that rise briefly into the night before vanishing among the stars above. The smell surrounding the kiln is unlike anything else in the town. Smoke from seasoned timber mixes with warm earth, damped clay, and the faint scent of burning olive branches, creating an aroma every potter immediately recognizes as the smell of honest work. Although the fire appears steady from the outside, an experienced craftsman knows that the real battle is taking place inside the sealed chamber, where no human eyes can see. Hundreds of carefully shaped vessels now sit surrounded by steadily increasing temperatures. Each bowl, each amphora, each oil lamp, and each drinking cup experiences the fire differently depending upon its thickness, its position inside the kiln, and even the direction from which heat reaches its surface. Your task throughout the night is not simply feeding wood into the flames. It is quietly guiding an invisible transformation taking place behind heavy stone walls. Trusting years of experience more than anything your eyes can directly observe. Occasionally you step toward the narrow opening near the chimney where a small amount of smoke escapes into the evening sky. To most villagers, smoke is simply smoke, but to an experienced Greek potter it speaks a silent language filled with valuable information. At first, the smoke appears thick, white, and heavy as remaining moisture slowly leaves the clay hidden inside the kiln. Hours later, it grows thinner, changing gradually into pale gray before almost disappearing altogether. Every subtle difference tells you something important about the progress taking place beyond the stone walls. Without modern instruments, this quiet conversation between smoke and potter becomes one of your most trusted guides. Your apprentice sits nearby upon a rough wooden stool, watching every movement with complete attention. Earlier in the day, his energy seemed endless, but now fatigue quietly settles across his young face. His eyelids grow heavier each passing hour, yet he fights sleep bravely because he understands the importance of tonight's firing. Every few minutes, you ask him to bring another bundle of carefully split olive wood from the storage shed. Though tired, he never complains. Like every apprentice before him, he knows that mastery is earned, not through comfort, but through patient endurance. One day, this kiln may become his. Responsibility and the lessons learned beside its fire will remain with him long after your own hands have grown too old to shape clay. As darkness deepens, the stars above ancient Greece become breathtakingly clear. Without the bright lights of modern cities, the heavens appear astonishingly alive. Thousands upon thousands of stars stretch from one horizon to the other, while the pale ribbon of the Milky Way glows softly across the night sky. Looking upward during a brief moment of rest, you cannot help wondering how many generations of potters before you stood in exactly this same place, beneath exactly these same stars. Long before your grandfather first touched clay, another craftsman watched another kiln burn through another peaceful Greek night. Long after you are gone, others will almost certainly do the same. There is something strangely comforting in belonging to such a long, unbroken chain of ordinary people quietly, dedicating their lives to useful work. Near midnight, another visitor approaches the workshop carrying a small bronze lantern. It is an elderly merchant preparing for an important trading voyage at sunrise. His ship leaves with the morning tide, and before departing, he wishes to reassure himself that the large shipment of decorated amphorae will be ready as promised. Together you stand silently beside the glowing kiln. There is little either of you can do now, except wait. The pottery hidden inside will emerge only when the fire has completed its work and the chamber has cooled safely. Opening the kiln too early would allow cold night air to rush inside, causing vessels to crack instantly from sudden changes in temperature. Patience, once again, proves more valuable than haste. The merchant eventually smiles, wishing you good fortune before disappearing once more into the darkness. His footsteps fade gradually along the stone road until only the quiet crackling of the fire remains. Alone again beside the kiln, you settle onto a rough wooden bench worn smooth by countless nights, exactly like this one. Your hands, so busy throughout the day, finally become still. Looking closely, you notice how deeply the craft has marked them over the years. Tiny scars cross your knuckles where sharp fragments once cut your skin. Fingernails remain permanently stained by clay despite endless washing. The tips of your fingers have become thick and calloused from decades of shaping spinning vessels upon the wheel. These hands may never hold a soldier's sword or a philosopher's scroll, yet they have quietly created thousands upon thousands of objects that carried food, water, wine, oil, and precious memories into homes throughout the Greek world. Eventually your thoughts drift toward the families who will one day use the pottery now hidden inside the kilns. Somewhere a young bride may receive one of your painted amphorae as a wedding gift, filling it with fragrant olive oil produced by her husband's family. Somewhere else, a fisherman may eat supper from a simple bowl shaped by your hands after returning safely from the sea. Children, not yet born, will someday drink water from cups you created, while travelers sailing across distant waters will trust your sturdy storage jars to protect valuable cargo during dangerous voyages. Most of these people will never know your name. They will admire the pottery, perhaps praise its beauty or usefulness, but rarely stop to imagine the quiet craftsmen who remained awake through long nights beside a roaring kiln so that these ordinary objects could exist. Slowly, almost without noticing, the fire begins requiring less attention. The kiln has reached the tremendous temperatures needed to complete its remarkable transformation. Instead of feeding large quantities of wood into the flames, you now add smaller pieces at carefully measured intervals, maintaining the heat with gentle precision rather than overwhelming force. The rhythm becomes almost meditative. Add a log, wait, watch the smoke, listen to the fire, add another, wait again. Hour after hour passes beneath the stars until time itself seems to dissolve into the quiet crackling of burning timber. At last, sometime during the deepest hours of the night, the final pieces of firewood are placed carefully into the glowing firebox. There is nothing more to do. Now comes perhaps the most difficult task of all, waiting. The kiln must remain completely closed until the following day. Inside, temperatures remain hot enough to melt bronze, and cooling too quickly would undo everything you have worked so patiently to achieve. So, you quietly close the heavy entrance, brush loose ash from your clothes, and take one final look toward the chimney where only a faint ribbon of smoke now rises peacefully into the sleeping Greek sky. Tomorrow morning, when the stone walls have finally surrendered their tremendous heat, you will open the kiln and discover whether days of careful shaping, decorating, lifting, stacking, and tending the fire have been rewarded, or whether the fire has chosen another ending. That uncertainty is something every ancient Greek potter learns to live with, because no matter how skilled your hands become, the final decision always belongs to the flames. The first pale light of dawn does not arrive with celebration, excitement, or relief. Instead, it returns quietly, almost cautiously, as though the morning itself understands that your most important work has not yet ended. Throughout the long night, while nearly every family in the town slept peacefully beneath woven wool blankets, you remained beside the kiln, feeding the fire, watching the smoke, listening to the subtle language of burning wood, and trusting instincts developed over decades of patient experience. Now, as the eastern horizon slowly changes from deep indigo to soft shades of lavender and pale gold, exhaustion settles into every part of your body. Your shoulders ache from carrying heavy bundles of olive wood. Your back feels stiff after countless hours spent bending before the firebox. Your eyes burn gently from smoke that drifted around the workshop all night, and your hands, those faithful tools that shaped every vessel. Inside the kiln, dry, cracked, and coated with a fine grey layer of ash that no amount of washing ever seems able to remove completely. Yet, despite your fatigue, you cannot allow yourself to hurry. The greatest mistake a potter can make is believing the work is finished simply because the fire has gone out. Hidden behind the thick stone walls, the pottery remains unimaginably hot, continuing its silent transformation long after the last flames have faded. If you were to open the kiln now, cool morning air would rush inside with shocking speed, causing the carefully fired vessels to crack apart almost instantly. Weeks of labor would disappear in a matter of seconds. So instead of acting, you wait. Waiting has become one of the most difficult lessons your profession has ever taught you. Farmers must wait for crops to ripen. Fishermen wait for favorable winds. Shepherds wait for lambs to grow strong enough to follow the flock. But potters wait for something invisible heat itself to slowly leave the clay. There is no shortcut, no clever technique, and no secret passed down from master to apprentice that can persuade the kiln to cool faster without consequences. Time alone must complete the work that fire has begun. As the town gradually awakens around you, familiar sounds begin returning one by one. A rooster calls somewhere beyond the olive groves. Donkeys carrying empty baskets toward the market clatter. Across uneven stone roads, women sweep dust from the entrances of their homes using bundles of dried reeds. while children, still rubbing sleep from their eyes, chase one another through narrow alleys before breakfast. From the harbour, gulls circle noisily above fishing boats returning with the morning's catch, and somewhere beyond the rooftops the first temple prayers drift gently through the fresh air. Listening to these ordinary sounds, you realize something few people outside your trade ever understand. Every peaceful morning they enjoy depends upon countless craftsmen already awake long before sunrise. The baker has baked the bread, the blacksmith has already lit his forge, the fisherman has already returned from the sea, and you, though no one notices, have spent the entire night guarding a chamber filled with fragile clay so that the town may continue using bowls for breakfast, amphorae for olive oil, lamps for darkness, and jars for storing grain through another season. Pottery is so ordinary that most people hardly notice it at all. Yet remove it from Greek life, and suddenly every household begins struggling with problems they never imagined. Without sturdy storage jars, precious grain spoils before winter arrives. Without amphorae, merchants cannot transport wine or oil across the Aegean Sea. Without cooking pots, simple meals become almost impossible to prepare efficiently. Without oil lamps, entire homes disappear into darkness each evening. The objects you create rarely inspire songs from poets or statues from sculptors, yet they quietly support nearly every corner of civilization itself, asking for nothing more than careful hands, patient hearts, and endless hours of exhausting labor. When the sun finally climbs a little higher above the surrounding hills, you judge that enough time has passed to begin opening the kiln. Even now you move slowly, resisting every temptation to rush. Together with your apprentice, you carefully remove the clay bricks, sealing the entrance one at a time, each still pleasantly warm beneath your fingertips despite the passing hours. As the final barrier comes away, a wave of dry heat rolls outward into the cool morning air, carrying with it the unmistakable scent of fired clay, a warm, mineral fragrance unlike anything else in the ancient world. For a few moments you can see almost nothing beyond shimmering currents of hot air rising from the chamber. Then, little by little, the outlines of the pottery begin emerging through the haze like distant buildings, appearing after thick morning fog. One by one, familiar shapes reveal themselves, the large amphora standing exactly where you placed it yesterday, the rows of elegant drinking cups resting quietly upon the upper shelf, the delicate oil lamps lined carefully along the side wall. None appear cracked, none appear collapsed. Your heartbeat quickens despite years of experience, because every firing remains uncertain until this exact moment. Carefully reaching inside, using thick folded cloths to protect your hands, you lift the first finished vessel into the sunlight. Yesterday it was soft earth. Today it rings with a clear, beautiful sound as your fingernail gently taps its side. Its pale surface has transformed into strong ceramic capable of surviving years, perhaps generations of daily use. The black painted decoration shines softly against the warm reddish clay. Every vine, every wave pattern, every carefully painted figure preserved exactly as you intended before the firing began. Relief spreads quietly across your face, though only for a moment, because dozens more pieces still wait to be inspected individually. Some may hide tiny cracks too fine to notice immediately. Others may have warped slightly beneath the tremendous heat. A few might even reveal unexpected imperfections that no amount of craftsmanship could have prevented. Such disappointments are accepted almost as naturally as success. Perfection belongs only to the gods. Potters settle for doing their very best. Still, as more and more vessels emerge safely from the kiln, neatly arranged beneath the bright Greek morning sun, you cannot help feeling a quiet sense of satisfaction that asks for neither applause nor celebration. The townspeople walking past your workshop may never realize they are witnessing the end of a process that began weeks earlier with nothing more remarkable than muddy clay collected from a riverbank. They simply see shelves gradually filling with beautiful pottery ready for market. But you know every hidden chapter of each vessel's story, the freezing mornings digging clay from the earth, the endless kneading that strengthened it, the aching muscles from spinning the wheel hour after hour, the careful painting that demanded steady hands, the sleepless night beside the roaring kiln, and finally this peaceful morning when ordinary earth completed its remarkable journey into something both useful and beautiful. And without allowing yourself more than a few quiet moments to admire the results, you begin preparing the workshop once again, because another pile of fresh clay already waits patiently in the corner, ready to become tomorrow's pottery, tomorrow's labor, and tomorrow's story. As another peaceful afternoon slowly settles over the town, the workshop begins returning to its familiar rhythm, almost as though the long night beside the kiln had never happened. The finished pottery now stands neatly arranged along sturdy wooden shelves, glowing softly beneath streams of warm Mediterranean sunlight that pour through the wide doorway. Some vessels will leave the workshop before sunset, carried carefully by merchants preparing for journeys across the Aegean Sea. Others will remain here for several more days while customers inspect them one by one, searching for the perfect amphora to hold olive oil, the strongest storage jar for wheat, or the finest painted crater to display during family celebrations. Looking around the workshop, it would be easy for a visitor to admire the graceful curves, elegant painted figures, and remarkable craftsmanship visible upon every piece. Yet only you know how much invisible labor hides inside each vessel. No customer will ever see the frozen mornings spent digging heavy clay from muddy riverbanks before sunrise. They will never feel the aching muscles that followed hours of kneading stubborn earth until every hidden air pocket disappeared. They will never witness the countless failed attempts made years ago while learning to center clay upon the spinning wheel, nor hear the heartbreaking sound of beautifully shaped vessels collapsing into useless heaps because one hand pressed just a little too firmly. They will never smell the smoke that filled your lungs during endless nights beside the kiln or experience the quiet anxiety of waiting until morning to discover whether fire had rewarded patience or destroyed weeks of careful effort. They will simply lift the finished pottery, smile approvingly, exchange a few silver coins, and continue their lives, never realizing that they are carrying away a small piece of yours. Yet, perhaps that has always been the true nature of craftsmanship. The greatest craftsmen rarely place themselves at the center of their work. Instead, they quietly disappear behind the objects they create, allowing usefulness to speak more loudly than their own names. You may never become as famous as the sculptors whose marble statues decorate great temples, nor as celebrated as poets reciting epic tales before crowds gathered in the marketplace. Historians writing about mighty generals and powerful kings will almost certainly never record the life of one ordinary potter working patiently inside a dusty workshop. And still, every day, your hands contribute something equally important to the world around you. The farmer depends upon your jars to protect his harvest through winter. The merchant trusts your amphorae to survive violent storms at sea, while carrying valuable cargo to distant islands. The innkeeper serves wine from vessels you carefully shaped months earlier. Mothers cook meals inside pots that once rested beneath your fingertips, while children drink water from cups born from the very same mound of clay you prepared before dawn. In quiet, unnoticed ways, your work touches nearly every household in the town, asking for neither applause nor recognition, only the opportunity to serve faithfully for many years. Perhaps the most remarkable part of your story is something you could never possibly imagine. Centuries will pass. The lively marketplace outside your workshop will eventually fall silent. The familiar houses lining these narrow streets will crumble beneath earthquakes, wars, changing empires, and the slow, patient work of time itself. Olive groves will be planted and replanted by generations who have never heard your name. Children yet unborn will become old, and their grandchildren will live lives so different from yours that they may struggle to imagine this peaceful little workshop ever existed. The great temples standing proudly upon nearby hills may lose their roofs. Marble statues may break apart. Wooden ships carrying merchants across the sparkling sea will rot away until not a single plank survives. Even your own home, your tools, your wheel, and the sturdy kiln that demanded so many sleepless nights will eventually disappear into dust. Yet beneath layers of forgotten earth, many of your humble clay vessels will endure. Hidden quietly beneath collapsed buildings or buried inside ancient wells, they will wait with astonishing patience for 2,000 years. Then, one distant morning in a future beyond your wildest dreams, archaeologists will gently brush away the soil covering one of your painted amphorae. They will hold it carefully beneath the sunlight, studying every brushstroke, every fingerprint accidentally pressed into the clay while it was still soft, every tiny imperfection left behind by your tired hands during one ordinary afternoon in ancient Greece. Museum visitors from lands you cannot even imagine will one day stand silently before that same vessel, admiring its elegance, while wondering about the anonymous craftsman who created it. Scholars will write books explaining how Greek families stored olive oil, celebrated weddings, traded across the Mediterranean, and lived their ordinary lives all because your pottery survived when almost everything else disappeared. Without realizing it, you will become one of history's quiet storytellers, not through written words, but through clay, not by seeking greatness, but by faithfully performing the same difficult work day after day until ordinary earth became extraordinary history. And so, as the warm afternoon breeze drifts gently through your workshop and another mound of fresh clay waits patiently in the corner, ready to begin the entire journey once again, you pause for only a single peaceful moment before returning to work. The wheel begins turning. Wet hands touch cool earth. Another vessel slowly rises beneath your fingertips, just as thousands have before it, and thousands more perhaps still will. History rarely remembers the hands that built civilizations, but without those hands, civilizations could never have existed at all. So, as the evening light gradually softens across the rooftops of ancient Greece, you quietly continue shaping tomorrow from yesterday's earth, one patient turn of the wheel at a time, and while your workshop slowly fades into the gentle silence of another approaching sunset, Perhaps it is finally time for us to leave these peaceful streets behind, carrying with us a new appreciation for the ordinary craftsmen whose quiet labor has echoed across thousands of years. Until our next sleepy journey into the past, rest well and sleep peacefully.